Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back to another episode of the Grow Strong Leader podcast. Before I introduce my very special guest today, I want to invite you to check out a new offering from my company, Grow Strong Leaders. We've recently released a cloud-based leadership development program called GSL Skill Builder for leaders who are eager to grow into the core values of their organization and strengthen their emotional intelligence. This program has the content and the practice to achieve both objectives. And you can learn more about GSL Skill Builder at our website, growstrongleaders.com. If you've ever wondered what's involved in a company being named one of the best places to work, today's guest is going to roll back the curtain and give you a look. I'm delighted to introduce you to Angie Redmon. Angie, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
You know, I am too, Angie. I have been looking forward to this because I know there's curiosity among my listeners about what's involved in these designations. And before we jump in, though, I want to acknowledge and give a shout out to our mutual friend and colleague, Melanie Ake, because she's the one who connected us, and we both just love Melanie. She's an amazing connector, amazing human being. So thank you, Melanie, for bringing us together. Angie has invested more than 2 decades learning what makes good companies great, and it always comes back to the same thing. Companies who care about their people as much as they care about their bottom line are more likely to recruit and retain outstanding employees. Through her dedication to workplace culture and employee engagement, Angie has developed and led HR teams with multiple companies in diverse industries. Now, Angie is the president and founder of Strive HR, an organization focused on guiding aspirational companies through the process of pursuing a best workplace distinction. She channels her work into helping organizations develop their people strategies. Angie also guides HR professionals to develop in their careers through her coaching and mentorship. So, Angie, the first thing I'm really curious about is how did you translate or turn your decades of experience in HR into the work that you're doing with companies today?
Well, as you mentioned, I do have a couple decades of experience in corporate HR. For my background, I knew I had reached a point in my career where I just craved flexibility for a multitude of personal reasons. I needed more flexibility in my schedule, but I also wanted a little bit more flexibility in the kind of work that I was doing professionally. And I got the bug from a couple of friends to go out and launch my own consulting business. And to be totally honest, I didn't know exactly what that looked like when I went out on my own. I gave it plenty of time, I felt, to do my research, to plan, to prep, to get all of those corporate and business ducks in a row. But when I launched the business, I found that the opportunities that were coming my way, they were really going back to more of an HR generalist type capacity. And I knew I really wanted to zone in on culture and engagement. I just honestly didn't know what that looked like. So I kind of practiced what I preach now, which is to partner with a coach. And spending a lot of time with that coach, I said, I know I want to focus on culture. I know I want to focus on engagement. I know those other needs are there for HR leaders from an administrative and generalist standpoint, and I have great colleagues and friends I can refer to them, but that's not what I want to do. So after a lot of deliberation, the discussion came around, well, gosh, at your last employer, you really helped them elevate to the status of getting all of these workplace awards. Why don't you help other companies do that? And I honestly didn't think that work even existed. So I decided to double down and figure out what that would look like. And that's really how Strive took a new evolution. I mean, I launched the business, really spent that first year saying, how do I take culture and engagement and make that the forefront of my business? And so in doing so, rebranded and really focused in on the focus of Strive being to help companies reach award-winning workplace distinction. Now, this was also around the shutdown, the COVID shutdown time. And I've got a really strong network of HR leaders. And a lot of HR leaders were coming to me at that time saying, I'm looking for mentorship. I think I need a coach. I don't know what that looks like. So I really also took that expertise of culture and engagement and said, how do I put that in the forefront of HR leaders? So not just helping corporate executives, CEOs, COOs, CFOs focus on what their role looks like with coaching, what their role looks like with engagement and culture, but also helping HR in a leadership capacity. And that's how the evolution of my coaching business also began. So Strive HR really is kind of two-pronged to help organization earn that type of distinction, also to help HR leaders get that business coaching that they need. And what's great is a lot of times those go hand in hand. So I get the opportunity to work both sides because you really need both. So that's really how I was able to take that, all of those years of HR experience, and really hone in on something that really lit me up and gave me the flexibility that I needed personally, but the flexibility that I needed professionally to focus on the kind of work I wanted to do.
No, I just love your story, Angie, and the fact that you hit on something that helped you not to necessarily lead with, let's work on your culture, but helping to really get people to think about, what does it mean to be a great workplace? What does it mean to create an environment where people want to come to work for us and want to stay here? And I guess that would be then so I just love the work you're doing and the approach you've taken. I think it's absolutely brilliant. When you think about a great place to work, what in your mind are the elements that really constitute what that would look like?
Yeah, well, there's a few words that really come to mind, and a few of those are intentional. So being very intentional about what you do every day, especially when it comes to your culture. You're not doing things just for the sake of doing them. There's definitely a reason behind why you are doing it, not just checking the box. Commitment is another word that I think of when it comes to that. Are we committed to our employees? Are we committed to not just making money for our business, but committed to the development of our employees so that our company can grow? And with that definitely comes alignment. So really just being very intentional and committed to creating a great workplace where your employees are aligned with what your organization does. And a lot of times when I talk with companies, that's one of the first challenges I hear, and it's not part of that first conversation. Typically, you don't find this out till several conversations down the road, that there's actually a misalignment between what the employees are doing to connect their goals and their goals to the company's strategies. So helping those employees understand what they do every single day, how that helps the organization. And on the flip side of that, as an organization, what are you doing every single day to align to the goals of your employees? So it definitely goes both ways.
Boy, and that strikes me as the need for conversations, right, between an employee and their manager, and those kinds of conversations happening throughout the organization. And yet it's got to start at the top so that the senior executives are able to convey to the whole organization, but also to those leaders that report to them, so that it all becomes aligned. So where do you start with making that the reality?
Well, when I first start talking to a company about their culture, it's everything goes back to their why they even want to make their culture better. And so I may get different answers from the HR leader. I may get different answers from the CEO. I may get different answers from the frontline manager. So it's really important that from a collective standpoint as an organization, because the effort to become an award-winning workplace doesn't reside with just one person. It's the combination of all of us within an organization putting our efforts together. So getting together with a common why. Let's take recruitment, for example. So a company may have a goal to grow their business by X dollars, X percentage. So the why for that CEO may be the growth of the organization. The why of the HR leader may be, I want recruitment to be so much easier for me. The why for the manager may be, I have production that we need to get done. So I need the people in place to be able to do that. If you think about it, it's all going back to their common why. So the why may be the growth of the organization, and each of them may have a different aspect of that, but making sure we're all on the same page. Because going through this process is going to get tough. It's not, if it was easy, every organization in this country would be a best place to work. So it's really making sure that we can center back to our common why and why we're even going through this effort in the first place.
Listening to you makes me wonder, what are some of those obstacles that make it hard, that, get in the way of a company being able to do this? Because I think the more concrete that we can make this for people, the more they can then drill down in their own organizations and look at, where are our obstacles among the ones that exist? Where do we need to dig in and find out how to make those kinds of adjustments?
And when companies, when I'm talking with them, they tend to fall in one of two camps. Either they recognize these problems that you're talking about and they want to fix these issues and challenges that they're running into, or they may be in a celebratory mode. This is such a great place to work. We want to shout it from the rooftops. And because earning a Best Workplace Award distinction is a phenomenal recruitment tool. People tend to gravitate to organizations because they know if they earn that distinction, they probably put in the time and effort, and they can say, I want to work for a company that's important to them. So if they're at that point where they've gone through these obstacles, and we'll talk about those obstacles here in just a moment, but if they've got to the point of, we want to shout from the rooftops that we have elevated to this status and we want to tell everyone about it, that's obviously a lot easier than those that have the work to be done. So those that have the work to be done, one thing I will say to them is, if you are applying for any type of an award just for the award's sake, you're doing it for the wrong reason. The award is the vehicle to get you to the other side, which is the celebratory, this is a great place to work. The vehicle helps put you, the vehicle of applying for an award, I should say, gives you that roadmap of things that you can focus on by gathering engagement information from your employees, by putting in the work of what you need to do to make your culture better so that you can then get to that destination.
Yeah. So let's talk about, what is the process of applying for one of these awards? It's probably not the same for every type, but I bet there's some common elements to them that organizations need to be aware of so they can do that pre-work, as
Absolutely.
you say, to get themselves ready for that process.
Absolutely. Well, and you nailed it. It really, there's so many different types of awards out there, and they all have their own process. But I will say there are processes for someone applying for a workplace award. There's another process for people who are applying for a certification. So you may hear of companies saying, I'm just going to throw some examples out for you, like best places to work and top workplaces. Those are awards that a company could earn where they are competing against other organizations, possibly in their geographic area or possibly within their industry. So you may say best places to work in, fill in the state, or best places to work in, fill in the industry. And so that's their competition. Whereas if you're looking at a certificate, Great Places to Work, for example, is another one of those where they have a predetermined set of criteria. And if you meet that set of criteria, you have earned that certification to where you go through that process and recertify every year. So you're not necessarily competing against other companies, but in my opinion, you're competing against yourself, especially if you're applying year after year and getting benchmark data as well. So that process let's hone in on like where you start. So you're initially with a lot of these going to decide, yes, we want to apply for an award. And there's a very minimal type application where you're giving information, especially about your organization, the size, how long you've been there, what kind of work you do, how many employees you have, that sort of thing. That's one piece where there's the employer application piece. The majority of the focus is then on the employee engagement piece. And a lot of these you'll find 80 to 85% of your score will depend on the feedback that your employees give on the employee engagement survey. So the administrator will take a look at all of that information. And then they have like, it's really hard to narrow it down to any one because there are so many different types, but essentially what they're looking at is that information and how do you compare against your competition.
Mm. And I'm just curious, when you're working with a company that's interested in, going for one of these awards, you're aware of the kinds of things that are going to be measured in these employee engagement surveys. Do you do kind of a preliminary engagement survey to help them see where they are now and where the gaps might be?
What's really helpful is, and I've had a number of clients do this in the past, is they will say, these are other engagement surveys that we have completed. It could be formally or informally. And so that gives us a great baseline. And we can take a look at that. And I have had organizations that I have encouraged that there are some findings within that we might want to work on that for a little bit before we go through the process of applying if there's a significant red flag. I have had organizations that have said, this was the actual engagement survey that we have done for another award. We didn't win that. Help us take a look at what this is and give us some guidance on some things that we can work on with an intention of applying again in the future. That has been a common practice. I have had other companies that I've worked with that have said, we've never applied, but let's have a discussion, if you will. And I can meet with executives. I can meet with other people within the company to get a more informal analysis of where they're at. So there are a lot of different approaches that we can go with that. But yes, there is a discussion of let's talk about where you're at currently so we know what obstacles we may be upfront going against. Now, I will tell you too, there's companies that have phenomenal information. You take a look at where it's at, where their information is, you can take a look at their scores, and they may have a 90% engagement rate on their score and still not make the award. And that really boils down to what competition were they competing against for that year. Everything may look great. There's a company that I talked with that had won for a number of years, and one year they did not. And that one year they did not, their engagement score was actually higher than it had been in the prior years when they did win. So you just don't know what other company, what other information that your competition is submitting as part of their application as well. And that's why I say if you're doing this just to win the award, that's where I know CEOs or others that I've talked with may say, why are we going to put forth the effort and the resources if that's not the ultimate, what it is that we want to achieve, and completely understand why that's something that it is that they want to earn. But really getting them to say that's kind of like the icing on the cake, is to be able to get that. Understanding what you're learning about your employees from an engagement standpoint is your real award.
So agree with you on that. When you think about it, the idea of just going after this to win an award is not a sustaining strategy, because if you're looking at it as a one-time thing and then you don't care how you treat your people after that, then you're not going to have the credibility, and the word's going to spread despite the award that you might have gotten. I would love for you to share, Angie, when you think about the different organizations you've worked with, let's pick one specific area that you see as, not all the time, but a pretty common issue that they have. And what are some of the tips or strategies that you help them navigate that so they come out in a better place after they've implemented what you've outlined for them?
Yeah, what I'm seeing a lot is overall the employee experience, and that can be something from how are we communicating with our employees, how are we implementing our values into our day-to-day activities, those sorts of things. Because when you look at it from an engagement standpoint, and you can look at that in total employee life cycle, especially when you have the engagement data back, you can see anywhere from demographic information from people that have just started with your company to those that have been with you for decades. And being able to take a look at what does that overall employee experience look like, and being able to digest that based on what departments that they're in, what their tenure is, what their role was in the company, and being able to guide an organization to take a look at that is something that I found to be very rewarding, because the nuances of that will consistently change. So it's something you definitely need to stay on top of and be very proactive. So you cannot just look at one point of data when you're looking at an employee engagement survey and those results. That is one point of data on one day. So that is really just a tool and a resource. But being able to take that and say, this information based on other trend and history that you have with the company, being able to set structure based on that is what's really helpful.
How much do you incorporate having conversations with different people in the organization? So you have the data from a survey.
Mm-hmm.
There's also nothing like interacting with people to get additional insights and ideas. What have you learned as a result of, or how do you incorporate that first of all? And then
One of my favorite things is to work with frontline managers. And because you talked early on during our conversation about getting that strategic guidance from the organization's leader about these are the things that we're focused in on. And then you have the information that you've gathered from the employee survey. One additional piece of that to keep in mind is what are the strategic goals and directions of the company. So as you have all of that information, where it really lights me up is then to be able to take that and disseminate that into a department level and be able to work with those department leaders to say, we know these are the goals of the company. We know this is the strategic direction of the company, but you know your employees better than anybody else. So knowing that information, how do we filter this down to your employees so that your employees then can take a look at that and work with you to say, okay, how can I help contribute to that? And when your employees see and learn how they can help contribute to that, that helps them grow and develop. And then too, that frontline manager can say, I understand that this is where we're headed. I know this about our employees, and I know these are the areas in which they need support, maybe the areas in which they need develop. So be able to filter that information back up to say, if this is the direction that we're headed, if these are the things that we need to work on, let's look at implementing and then fill in the blank of whatever it is their employees need to help the company achieve the goals. So they're that linchpin that can share information both ways and be able to see what the strategic direction is, but also what the employee focus is, and be able to connect the two of those. And I think they're often in a role that's very overlooked and overworked. And so the more we can pour into our managers to help give them the tools and resources they need to be able to support both sides, not only the executive direction and the strategic direction of the company, but to be able to help the employees, they're just the linchpin, and we really need to invest in them to help them to be able to do that. But I love to be able to share with them engagement survey findings. And it's so rewarding to be able to share to them, this is what your employees think about you. These are the things that you do that they love, that really helps and supports them. And this is also what additional help they need from you. Mm-hmm. So if I could share a quick story about that too. I was working with a company on that very specific thing. And I had engagement comments back from employees. And I tell you, when I look at engagement surveys, I spend hours like pulling the sleeves up, digging in and looking at them. So not just the statistical data, but the open-ended comments, because that really helps give shed some light into why that data looks like it does. But I had a specific situation where, and this is an organization I knew very well, and the employees on the statistical data of the survey, the manager didn't get a very high ranking on what this person was being measured on, from accessibility, communication. And it really surprised me because I know how the employees felt about this person. So as I went in and I dug through the open-ended comments, the feedback that they shared is, we thoroughly respect and enjoy this manager, but they are being pulled in so many different directions, they're not accessible. So when you ask the question of accessibility of that manager, of course they're going to give them a negative score. It doesn't mean they thought any less of them, but they needed that person, and that person was also needed by so many others. So long story short, we were able to conclude that they loved their manager. They loved working for that person. They just wanted more of that person. We ended up going through a full restructure of that department, digging in to say, we need to add some more middle line levels so employees have a day-to-day person to go to, but then still have that leadership of that person over the overall department. That score significantly improved the next year. They went from one of the lower ranking departments initially to one of the higher ranking departments after we put some of those actions into place. And it was really just proof point. You can't look at one point of data on engagement and survey and make a lot of assumptions. You really need to go in. But it was having conversations with employees, having conversations with other people that worked with that manager to really get to the root of what the problem was so that we could get it fixed. And things are going great now.
Such a fabulous example. And it points to the importance of going beyond the numbers. To, the numbers can highlight an issue, but not necessarily the root cause of that issue. And I think what can happen sometimes is there are assumptions made about why, without digging in as you did with them to determine what's really creating this lack of accessibility. And it had nothing to do with the manager's attitude or, interest in the people there. Clearly that was the case, but other elements were getting in the way. So I just love that, because I think it speaks to the importance of digging deeper and not taking at a superficial level a certain number and then assuming, oh, we have a real issue here, and assuming the issue is something it's not.
Right.
And, I could just see, without that kind of analysis, a prescription being made for this manager to become more accessible, to become more of something that wasn't even needed.
Right.
And so not really getting at what the real issue is. So I think the takeaway for my listeners is anywhere in your organization where you see a lack of engagement or you see negative responses, take the time to get curious and find out what's really behind those. And that requires conversations with the people who are giving that feedback to dig in and really learn more about what's going on.
Right. And your employees want to share information with you, but believe it or not, they want you to ask. And what the worst thing you can do, though, is to not do anything with that information that you're given.
Talk about that. What are the downsides of ignoring the data?
Well, you're sending a message of we asked, but we really don't care, or we asked, but we're not going to do anything with it. I mean, there's so many different negative ways that could go. So when I first start working with a company, I ask a commitment from them from the get-go. Are you committed to doing work with the information that you find? And if they say they are not, I put a pause and say, then now's not the right time for you, because you will do more harm than good by asking your employees for feedback and then not doing anything with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with when an employee gives you an idea, whether it's through this survey, whether it's through a one-on-one conversation. There's nothing wrong with saying that you're not able to act on information. It's how you go about doing so. It's great if an employee gives you an idea and you can't act on it, to say yes, and because you're trying to get more information about why they made that suggestion. So their suggestion may not work for your organization, but the improvement idea of what they are wanting to implement or what they're wanting to suggest may just need to be tweaked. And you want to continue to encourage your employees to give you feedback, to give you ideas. You don't want to stifle by immediately saying no. So I encourage companies, if employees give you suggestions, to never just immediately say no. Thank them, first of all, for providing the feedback, dig in and find out a little bit more as far as why they made that suggestion, and then get back with them to say whether you are going to be able to implement as suggested, or if not, what you plan to do with that information. And it may be that's a great idea. That would be better served if we do it third quarter rather than right now, and let me explain why. Always give that information because that'll encourage that employee to continue to be thinking about this continuous improvement focus. So yeah, that's just extremely important, being able to encourage your employees to continue to give that feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Angie, we've been in the 360 feedback business for a long time, and we have seen that same thing happen. If a leader gets a 360 feedback report, analyzes it, but then never goes back to the people who provided that feedback to say, here's what I learned, here's what I'm going to work on, then it's like, why did we bother investing the time and giving that information? So it's true at the organization level as well as the individual leader level.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the benefits. Why should a company go through this process? What's in it for them? What's in it for their company and their future?
Sure. Well, there's a number of reasons. One is credibility. It shows that an organization is committed to going through the process. It's not an overnight process. It works. From the time you submit your initial application to even find out if you made the list, you can be talking 6 months down the road. And then when you get the information, putting the work in. So it shows you're focused on continuous improvement, and that definitely demonstrates credibility. It also helps, as I mentioned earlier, from a recruitment tool. People like to work at organizations that have put in that work and that focus on the employee experience and having a great culture. It's a phenomenal recruiting tool. I've encouraged other people. When you see other companies that are saying we've earned this distinction, it's a magnet to future candidates for your company. From a retention standpoint, employees feel like if you are continuing to ask for this information, you're always wanting to make the workplace better. And that helps them say, this is a company that's invested in that. I want to stick around more. So they know that you're listening to them and you're acting on the feedback. So time and time again, it definitely helps from a retention standpoint for sure. And also, if you take a look at there's so many studies out there that show the direct connection between the employee experience and the customer experience. So if your employees are happy and taking care of your clients are going to notice that. And they're going to be very excited about that as well. Just to hear people that I've worked with, that their clients are celebrating when they have won, I mean, that's a huge pat on the back for them. So not only from a credibility standpoint from your employees, but a credibility standpoint from your clients and from your community. So there's so many different benefits that you can.
Well, as you were describing that, I got to thinking, one of the things that it does for your clients, it seems like it's a good retention tool for them because now they are affirmed, I made the right choice in choosing to do business with this company.
Yeah.
So it's a reinforcer for the clients to stay with you, not just the employees, I would think.
And I think it trickles down into everywhere in your business. I mean, I firmly believe in continuous improvement. Obviously, I named the company Strive HR for a reason. I believe in helping companies continuously get better. So this process not only helps you get better from an employee experience and employee and engagement standpoint, it also gives you an opportunity to kind of take a look at everything in your organization. What else could we be doing better? And everyone's going to benefit from that, your employees and your clients from that standpoint. So I think it's an approach that will trickle down into various other areas. I mean, I know people who are utilizing the EOS model. There's a lot of overlap in this process too. And so I have a client that I'm working with right now that's going through that. And then she's sharing with me that she's definitely seeing some overlap in continuous improvement and everywhere in their company as a result of it. So there's so many pluses to go through this process.
And do you recommend that clients go for multiple workplace awards, or is it more of a one-time thing? Because I'm aware in Virginia, for example, there are best places to work awards given annually for large, medium, and small companies, and those are published in the magazine once a year, and there are some perpetual winners in there, and they're not paying their way to get that award. They've, done the work as you've just described. And it seems like if you are a multiple award winner, that would give you even greater credibility than just a one-time recognition.
And it goes back to that why. When you decide what award you're going to apply for, you really need to focus in on why are you applying for an award in the first place. So if from a recruitment standpoint, especially if you're like a brick and mortar, or if you have people coming into your office, that local recognition is really helpful. So those types of awards that recognize the local geographic area, that's very helpful too. But say you earn that distinction and you have clients on a national basis, you may want to apply for an award that's specific to your industry. Because if you are in, say, for example, the finance industry, and you earn best finance firms to work for, that may be on a national basis. So what about if you're recruiting people who are not just local, you're recruiting people from a national standpoint? Then not only do those potential customers and clients see that you've put forth that effort to earn that distinction, so do future candidates. So there's so many different reasons behind why you might apply. And when I'm working with them on should they apply for an award, and we go back to their why, then we take a look at, okay, let's see which ones would help you from that standpoint. Then when you're looking at that, the geographic best place to work, we'll just use that for an example, might be with your state, but the industry award on a national basis could be 6 months down the road. So if you're wanting to do that, then you're going to be asking your employees to complete another engagement survey. And you really have to take a step back and say, does this make sense for our employees? Is this the right time? Are we asking too much of our employees in this period of time? I mean, there's some thorough analysis as far as which ones you're going to do and when you're going to do them. And on that same aspect, I will also say that you really need to take a look at what you have going on in your company at that time. If this is a focus to where you're going to apply for an award, and you also have a really big project that you're just starting, but you're applying for an award for the very first time, you really need to take a step back and say, can we manage this process? How is this going to be for our employees when we're asking them to go through this new upgrade, for example, but we're also going to ask them to complete the survey. So you're asking them to do something brand new during what could be potentially a very stressful time. So there's a lot of analysis on which ones are we going to do and when are we going to do them. Those companies that have earned year after year after year, employees know, hey, that employee engagement survey is coming up and fill in the blank whatever month. And they're expecting it and they're excited for it because it's become integrated in something that they do every year. So you can eventually get to that point, but when you're first starting out, you've got to make sure it's the right time for your company.
Well, it seems to me this whole idea of applying, multiple times, that ties in with the kind of final area I wanted to talk about, which is the sustaining of that workplace, whether you apply for an award or not. What's involved in continuing to keep a workplace that is a magnet for potential employees or leaders?
Something we talked about earlier was referencing back and sharing the information with the employees that you learned. That is paramount, in my opinion. So if you want to sustain this level of distinction, you need to be willing to share with your employees what you learned, and you need to be willing to put in the work to improve those areas. I encourage companies, when they're taking a look at their engagement survey information, you're going to see so many different things, and you're going to want to fix everything, and you can't fix everything. You really need to narrow down on what are maybe, I encourage 3, no more than 5. I kind of prefer 3 areas that you're going to be focusing on. And when you narrow in on those 3 areas, when you're deciding on what those 3 are, something to really keep in mind is, do these connect to the strategic areas we're focusing on in the company right now? And if they are, that helps give you a lot more support with time, resource, efforts, things that you need to be working on. So that continuous focus on those improvement areas throughout the year and giving your employees feedback on how you're doing those is crucial to keep this from a sustainability standpoint. If you set goals you need to commit to letting your employees know those updates. And if things change to where you say at the beginning, this is the information we have and this is what it is that we're going to do, then you don't give employees information, or you shift gears and do something else. The employees are left to think, why did I give you that feedback? You told me you were going to act and you didn't. So the distrust tends to really evolve at that point. So making it a part of something you do going forward. I encourage companies, if you have all hands meetings, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, this is a topic at every discussion so that the employees know that this is integral to the goals of your company. We go back to that alignment. We go back to that intentionality. We go back to that commitment to continuously working on these throughout the entire season, throughout the entire year. And then when you go back and you do the survey again the following year, it's great to be able to compare. Are those things still up there? Has something else evolved? Likely, as you start to work on something else, a different topic will elevate to an area in which you need to be focusing on. It's important to be able to benchmark not only against companies that you're competing against, but this is great to be able to benchmark against yourself when you're taking a look at how is it that we're focusing on these things throughout the year and making these improvements.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to, I think, draw everything together, because it's this whole idea of asking and acting,
Mhm.
and keeping people informed. Communication is sort of an underlying thread with all of this. The asking, the listening, the creating a plan to address, and always keeping people informed and in the loop about where you are with things, so that when that next survey comes up, they haven't been just blindly going through the
Mhm.
past year, not knowing where things stand or what's been done. So I think the whole idea of the employee experience and the buy-in, what you've been describing as a process for creating an award-winning workplace, applies to, and I know this is your whole purpose, creating a culture where people thrive.
Absolutely. And that's why I say it's more than a trophy. I've got that tagline everywhere. It's more than a trophy. It's about the great culture that you're able to create. It's the great culture you're able to sustain and what you're able to learn from.
It's great. Well, thank you so much, Angie. This has been so enlightening and such a pleasure talking to you, from your background in HR and then all the work that you're doing today. Please share with my listeners how they can connect with you and also how they can learn more about the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. At LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. I am also active. I have a Strive HR Facebook page. I tend to be a little bit more active on LinkedIn than that. So that's a great way to connect with me. And then on my website, which is strivehr.net, I've got a blog with a lot of this information. I push content out there frequently, just as a resource to be able to give guides and checklists and that sort of thing, to be able to help not only HR, but executive leaders be able to improve their culture. I will also share that I did co-author a book on culture. It's called Culture Impact. I partnered with 11 other authors, and we each have our own chapter. My chapter is about becoming an award-winning workplace, of course, and they can access that on the website at strivehr.net/book. And if anybody would like to connect with me, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. There's also a way they can connect with me on the website. If anybody happens to be in the Indianapolis area, I've got some great events coming up this fall, really zoning in on this award-winning workplace, manager development, how you go through the process of becoming, and I've got a workshop specific to how you go through the application process. So if somebody wants to connect with me, I'd be happy to share those resources with them. But I also have a free resource that I'd love to share with your audience that they will not see on the website, because this is really specific to some of these events. I think it's very, I'm not, but I think, I know it's very, very important from an engagement standpoint that we give our leaders and our managers tools to be able to gather engagement data so that they can make decisions going forward. So I put together a resource of 5 different ways that you can gather employee engagement data, along with within those resources, some questions. Like, for example, one of those 5 that I have is conducting one-on-one conversations. And I've got some tips within that guide of questions that you can ask to continue to gather that data. So it's strivehr.net/get data. And it's a free resource they can download and get some of those tips too.
Great. We'll be sure to put that on your show notes page.
Thank you.
Along with your LinkedIn profile and your company website, so they can learn more about how to become an award-winning workplace, and also create a culture where everyone really is committed to the organization's goals and motivated and valued for who they are and what they're contributing. And Angie, I want to thank you and acknowledge you for the work that you're doing to help really elevate the people inside the organizations, as well as these companies that you're working with. It's really important work. And I'm so glad that you took the time to really reflect on how could you best contribute? How could you position yourself to be a magnet for these companies that are seeking ways to really, take themselves, take their organizations, their work, and the results with their clients to the next level. So thank you for everything that you've been doing, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out the powerful tools we've created to help leaders strengthen their character and communication skills. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.